Early stage of launching my companies, I found myself facing a seemingly endless string of obstacles. One particular memory stands out. We had just attempted a rocket launch with SpaceX, and everything had pinned my hopes on went up in flames. Literally, it was one of those moments when you realize that no matter how brilliant your ideas seem, you can never fully anticipate the harsh reality of execution until you're in the thick of it. The day was scorching, my team and I were exhausted, and the rocket we had poured our hearts into was now scattered to debris. That didn't just burn through our finances, it scorched my pride and confidence. For a brief moment, I actually wondered whether I was cut out for this at all. I remember standing there, covered in ash and sweat. Hey, have I taken on more than I can handle? The answer at that moment fell uncomfortably close to yes. Yet in that chaos, I also sensed the faintest glimmer of a lesson that would eventually reshape how I view leadership. It wasn't about the title on my business card, it was about the example I set. Especially when everything seemed to be going wrong. The turning point came when I looked around and realized that everyone on the team was watching me, waiting to see how I would respond. These were brilliant engineers, analysts, and strategists who were passionate about our mission, just as I was. In their eyes, I could see a collective question, what now? I decided at that instant that my response needed to be constructive and calm. Instead of lashing out in frustration, I began picking up the pieces, both metaphorically and literally. And in doing so, I noticed a shift. Others stepped in to help, drawn by the simple fact that I was willing to show up, roll up my sleeves, and take responsibility. That was the breakthrough moment, realizing that leadership is not a job title, but a choice to rise above fear and model the behavior you'd like to see in others. I know many of you out there have had your own versions of these setbacks, your personal rocket failures. Perhaps it was a product launch that flopped, project that ran over budget, a career move that left you feeling uncertain. These experiences often feel isolating, as though you're the only one who has ever faced such disappointment. But the truth is, the person in this room carries a story of obstacles, moments when the world seemed to close in. The real question is not whether you've encountered setbacks. It's how you harness them to lead in a more authentic way. Sometimes the greatest leaders emerge from the toughest challenges precisely because they learn to remain calm in the storm and set an example others can follow. From that day onward, I promised to myself and to those who chose to work alongside me, I would demonstrate the resilience, curiosity, and determination that define truly effective leadership. Don't need to be the CEO or the manager in charge to influence people in a meaningful way. You can lead from the middle, you can lead from the back, and sometimes you can lead from the sidelines. In each instance, the key element is the example you set, the effort you put in, and the integrity with which you conduct yourself. The path forward might not always be smooth, but it can be guided by the principles of learning from mistakes quickly, refining your approach continuously, and inspiring others through consistent action. Proposal for us today is to explore a new way of thinking about leadership, one that removes the artificial barriers of hierarchy and emphasizes the power of individual example. You're an entry-level engineer or an experienced manager. You can drive positive change in your team, your organization, or even your community by aligning your actions with the values you hold dear. As we continue, I invite you to join me in climbing to a higher vantage point on what it means to lead. We'll tackle the fundamental idea that leadership isn't reserved for the chosen few, but rather a responsibility we can all embrace. Setting a strong example wherever we stand, each of us can make an impact far greater than we ever imagined possible. Now, let's ascend to the next part of our journey together, where we'll break down the essential components of developing leadership skills. We'll see that true leadership is within reach for all of us if we're willing to commit to learning, evolving, and showing the way through our own behavior. Let's start exploring how to do just that. I would like to begin by asking you a simple question. How often have you seen a new initiative fail, not because the plan was flawed, because no one truly stepped up to champion it by example? That question is where our climb begins. Let's embark on the first major challenge of this ascent and discover why personal example can be the most powerful catalyst for leading from any position. Imagine that question lingering in your mind. Do we rise to the occasion when everything seems stacked against us? If your answer is still uncertain, let's chart a path together that will transform that uncertainty into determination. I promise you, the view from higher ground will be worth every step. As we stand at this new base camp, let's delve into our exploration of leadership skills, starting with a discovery that might shift how you think about authority and influence. I'm convinced that once we unpack this idea, you'll never look at leadership the same way again. The first stage of our journey focuses on uncovering the hidden truths about leadership by example, and how even a single individual, regardless of rank, can tilt the entire culture of a team. This is where you realize that the mountain you're climbing is not about commanding from the top. It's about showing, through your actions, how a team can ascend together. Let's dive in. Leadership key point 1 begins now. I have found that the simplest way to begin any meaningful discussion on leadership is with that prompts us to rethink our assumptions. How do people respond when one individual decides to act differently? The higher standard, even if no official title demands it. In my own experiences building startups, that question has revealed hidden patterns time and again. Often think that real influence belongs solely to those recognized authority. Yet I've seen entire teams pivot, not because their boss told them to, because a single engineer or strategist took on a problem with such determination and positivity that everyone else felt compelled to match that energy. Consider a scenario I witnessed among a group of talented software developers. They were tasked with streamlining a critical platform project that, if done well, could cut overhead by a significant margin. Despite the importance of its mission, morale was low. People were juggling multiple projects and feeling burnout. Into this environment stepped a relatively junior developer who began tackling one small but crucial module. Instead of complaining about limited resources, this person immersed themselves in the details, learned what was needed, and incrementally improved that module. With each step, they documented the process openly, sent helpful updates to the team, and even recorded short videos explaining their approach to solving the smaller bugs. Day after day, colleagues started noticing. Soon, people who were initially lukewarm began to pitch in. They set aside their pessimism for just long enough to try one new idea. Next thing you knew, the project gained momentum, hitting milestones that had previously seemed out of reach. The reason I call this a case study worth remembering is because it reveals so much about the hidden nature of leadership. It was never about who had the biggest office or the biggest salary. It was about who took the first step, who set the tone by showing what diligent effort could achieve. When I talked to the team afterward, they mentioned how this single individual's relentless focus and clarity of communication had motivated them more than any official memo ever could. They saw practical, real-world progress and wanted to be a part of it. This phenomenon highlights a deep truth: people pay attention to results and consistency more than to titles. Show them evidence of a better way, and they'll often follow it. This is leadership at its most fundamental level, the quiet persuasion that arises from aligning one's behavior with a larger goal. It's not showy, it's simply effective. So how do we analyze this from a deeper perspective? One key element is the concept of social proof. Humans are wired to look to others for cues on how to act, especially in situations that are novel or stressful. If someone demonstrates a more constructive approach, it becomes a silent invitation for others to do the same. Another aspect is psychological ownership. If people see that someone cares enough to dive in wholeheartedly, it sparks an inner drive to contribute. We might not be able to fully quantify that drive, but it's palpable, can turn a stagnant environment into an incubator for innovation almost overnight. The question then is, we leverage this insight for practical applications in our own environments. First, look for the smallest possible improvement you can make in a project, system, or culture. Start there. Do it so well that it becomes a talking point. Second, communicate your progress. Don't brag. Simply share your lessons and the results. Third, remain consistent. Become jaded if they see an initial spark that quickly fizzles out. Consistency is the bedrock of trust. If you show up day after day, it becomes almost impossible for others not to take notice. Consistency in character is more compelling than grand speeches. Once said an executive mentor I deeply respect, and those words ring true in every successful team I've seen. As you begin this process, you might experience a breakthrough realization you have more influence than you ever imagined. That revelation is crucial because it boosts your motivation to keep going. Suddenly, leadership no longer feels like an abstract concept. It feels tangible, as though you can reach out and touch it. Which brings me to a quote I once heard from Eleanor Roosevelt: "It is better to light a candle than curse the darkness." Notice how succinct yet powerful that sentiment is. Exactly the principle at play when one person's positive example transforms the whole group dynamic. And walk through these insights, it's time for a concluding thought on this first key point. Discovery often starts with questioning our old assumptions. If you believe that official titles or hierarchical power were the only gateways to leadership, I hope you're beginning to see that your own actions can open doors you never knew existed. We've collectively embraced the mentality of setting example first and expecting influence to follow. We're already halfway up this mountain of leadership development. The journey will have its trials, but the higher we climb, the clearer our perspective becomes. Let's shift our vantage point and explore how storytelling can crisp these lessons, giving them an emotional resonance that theory alone can't provide. In my own experience, data and logic can guide decisions, but it's thoughts on personal stories that inspire lasting change. Now, we advance to the next phases of this exploration, a deeper look at how personal narratives, both our own and those we observe in others, reveal the power of leading by example. In another chapter of my own journey, I learned that the stories we tell ourselves about leadership can either limit us or propel us forward. Let's delve into how that works as we ascend even further to our summit. There was a time when I was juggling the responsibilities of Tesla and SpaceX simultaneously, filled with relentless schedules and high-pressure deadlines. Yet within that whirlwind, I found that stories of small victories, monumental failures, unexpected recoveries, provided the framework for keeping teams motivated and connected to the bigger mission. Sometimes just when your energy is about to falter, the right story can remind you why you started climbing this mountain in the first place. Our second key point focuses precisely on that, how the act of storytelling, especially when it demonstrates leading by example, galvanizes an entire group toward a shared goal. Let's dig into that now. I recall sitting in a cramped conference room in the early days of Tesla. The mood was tense, we were behind schedule and over budget. One of our engineers, whom I'll call Lisa for privacy, had a family emergency that required her to take some time off. Naturally, we were all supportive. Once she left, we felt her absence acutely. She had been our lead on a critical subsystem, and we weren't sure how to move forward without her as the days stretched on, new challenges arose. Our supply chain was delayed. Certain parts weren't meeting quality standards, and investor pressure loomed. We were drowning in a flood of problems, but Lisa's example shone through even in her absence. Earlier in the year, she had stepped up during a critical design review and taken responsibility for a problem that no one else wanted to own. Through sheer determination and methodical work, she had resolved that issue, proving that a single person's dedication could alter the trajectory of an entire project. Her quiet heroism became a story we told each other in that conference room, a reminder we had already overcome a seemingly impossible obstacle thanks to one person's willingness to take the lead. As we recalled Lisa's contribution, something shifted in the atmosphere of that room. Instead of bickering over who was at fault for the delays, the team started brainstorming creative ways to fill in for her. Could we reassign tasks? Redesign that subsystem to be more modular so others could pitch more easily. From that conversation emerged an unexpected burst of collaboration. People who had felt disconnected became actively involved. Spurred on by the memory of Lisa's example, the biggest challenges we faced soon took on a new context. Instead of endless frustration, we had a shared narrative of resilience to lean on. Remember how Lisa took on that insurmountable problem last quarter and didn't give up until she found a solution. That single story had the power to anchor our hopes and remind us that each one of us was capable of doing the same. It provided moral courage, which is just as essential as any technical expertise when you're striving to build something extraordinary. Reflecting on that moment, I realized it offered vital lessons about the capacity of storytelling to influence a team's mindset. Our world is flooded with data and metrics, but stories speak to the heart in a way numbers can't. That's why a compelling story, especially one centered on someone who exemplifies the leadership traits we desire, can become a North Star for everyone involved. It strips away the excuses and cynicism, leaving behind the simple but profound truth that each individual can make a difference. The challenge, of course, is ensuring these stories are genuine and not mere propaganda. Authenticity matters because people are quick to sense when a narrative is being engineered to manipulate them. In our case, Lisa's story was undeniably real. We had seen the late night hours she put in, watched her wrestle with complex design challenges, and admired her determination to share her knowledge with anyone who asked. We didn't embellish or sugarcoat. We simply recount what had happened in a moment of crisis and how that example inspired us. From a broader perspective, the power of storytelling and leadership becomes even clearer. Imagine if we each collect stories of everyday people, teammates, colleagues, or even friends who stepped up in ways that align with the values we want to see in our organizations. Sharing these narratives can spark a ripple effect, giving others the courage to do the same. It's not about glorifying a single hero, it's about normalizing the idea that anyone can be that hero if they choose. One of the best parts of leading through example-based stories is watching how they grow beyond their original context. The story of Lisa's dedication might start within a small engineering group, but eventually it travels through conversations, performance reviews, and even new hire orientations. Soon, her name becomes synonymous with a particular kind of can-do spirit. That's when you know the story has transcended mere anecdote and become part of the cultural fabric. Let me share a quote that resonates with this idea. I once came across these words by Maya Angelou. We'll forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them. The emotional undertone in a story can inspire people long after they've forgotten the details. In leadership, that emotional impact is priceless because it fuels motivation at a level no spreadsheet can touch. As we draw lessons from Lisa's example, we see how practical solutions often emerge from the shared commitment stories can foster. In that cramped conference room, we not only relocated tasks, but also redesigned elements of our workflow to be more collaborative. That was a tangible change, a direct outcome of harnessing the power of one genuine story. This experience underscores why I believe storytelling must be an integral part of leadership. Especially when you want to encourage people lead from whatever position they hold, you need narratives that dismantle the myth of only bosses lead. It's one thing to tell someone, you can be a leader too. It's another thing entirely to show them a lived example of someone who did exactly that. So let's translate these insights into your own journey. Think about a situation in your life, past or present, where someone without any formal authorities still shaped the culture around them. Perhaps they were the helpful colleague, stayed behind to assist with the deadline, the person who quietly mentored new team members. Reflect on how that story made you feel. Was it a spark that lit a fire within you? Could you pass that story along to others and create a chain reaction of positive behavior? If the answer is yes, you've got a powerful leadership tool at your disposal. In many ways, ascending this mountain means carrying the stories of those who have gone before you and using them as stepping stones. Each story can boost you to the next level, especially when the climb gets tough. And it will get tough because true leadership asks for resilience, courage, and a willingness to keep going when things get messy. That's why harnessing the emotional power of stories is such a critical element of sustaining both motivation and unity in a team. Ultimately, the key takeaway here is that storytelling is just a communication technique. It's a leadership strategy. It stitches together the individual experiences of a group into a shared tapestry of meaning, encourages everyone to see themselves as capable of leading through example. After all, if Lisa did it, if someone else you admire did it, then why not you? As we continue our climb, let's shift our perspective to more analytical ground, where we'll examine the data and research that back up our belief in leadership from any position. This next vantage point, although more numbers focused, every bit as important in reinforcing why setting a strong personal example is such a potent form of influence. Data can often cut through skepticism, offering proof that leading by example is far more than a feel good idea. It's an approach that consistently shapes high-performing teams and innovative cultures. With that in mind, let's take another step up the mountain and delve into some compelling statistics and market trends that bolster what we've already seen through personal stories. As we embark on this third key point, remember, numbers don't tell the whole story, but they do sharpen our understanding of why certain leadership behaviors yield remarkable results. So let's deepen our insight by examining what the data actually says about leading from any position and the tangible impact it has on organizational success. When I first started building my companies, I was convinced that a strong vision would be enough to rally people. Vision is absolutely critical, but over time I realized that data, backed evidence of what makes teams excel, helps reinforce that vision. If we want to argue that leadership by example is not only morally right, but also beneficial for business, we need the numbers to prove it. According to a study conducted by Harvard Business Review, 6% of employees in high-performing organizations claim they're more inspired by peers who model exemplary behavior than by formal leaders who issue directives. Think about that for a moment. More than half of your people might be looking horizontally rather than vertically for guidance. This finding suggests a fundamental shift in how influence works in modern workplaces, which are often team-based and highly collaborative. Instead of a single person at the top dictating culture, various individuals throughout the organization collectively shape how people work together. Intriguing statistic comes from a Gallup poll focusing on workplace engagement. The poll found that employee engagement is closely tied to the sense of ownership individuals feel in their tasks. When employee and his colleagues, regardless of rank, taking initiative and modeling accountability, engagement levels rose by nearly 30%. That's a significant jump. And it translates directly into increased productivity, reduced turnover, and often better financial outcomes for startups, especially where resources are tight and every team member's contribution matters. 30% can be the difference between meeting a make or break milestone and falling short. Market trends further reinforce this perspective. We're living in an age where organizational hierarchies are becoming flatter. Technology has enabled remote work, cross-functional teams, and decentralized decision-making. As a result, businesses often rely on flexible structures where leadership can and must arise spontaneously in response to emerging challenges. We see this trend playing out in agile methodologies, where small, self-organizing teams constantly adapt to feedback. In such models, the best ideas often come from the ground up. The person who leads can change depending on the project phase or the specific skill set required. There's no single boss dominating every decision. Instead, leadership flows to the person whose expertise and passion is most relevant at the time. If we dig deeper into research from institutions like MIT, we learn that organizations where distributed leadership is the norm tend to outperform more traditional, top-heavy organizations in innovation metrics. These metrics might include the rate of new product introductions, patent filings, or even the ability to pivot swiftly in changing markets. At the heart of distributed leadership is the principle that anyone can step up and set a positive example. This is exactly what we're talking about when we say you can lead from any position by demonstrating behavior you wish to see. Let's talk about practical applications for a moment. That alone is interesting. How do you use it to actually implement a more inclusive leadership style? One approach is to redesign performance evaluations. Instead of only assessing individuals based on their direct deliverables, some companies are including metrics related to high influence or collegial leadership. They look at how a person's behavior affects their team's morale, creativity, or overall effectiveness. This signals that leadership by example is recognized and rewarded whether or not someone has an official leadership title. I recall an instance at Tesla where we implemented a peer review system that included a category specifically dedicated to leadership qualities. People could nominate coworkers who consistently went above beyond modeling the company's values. The result was a tangible increase in voluntary leadership. People started realizing that even if they weren't managing a team, their actions were visible and impactful. That recognition had a powerful effect. When individuals felt appreciated for leading by example, they continued to do so and often took it a step further. Let's step back and conduct a bit of in-depth research analysis on what fosters this phenomenon. Sociologists and organizational psychologists point to a factor called psychological safety. When employees believe that their environment supports risk-taking and won't punish them for small failures, far more likely to take initiative, leading by example can play a key role in building the safety. If people see peers stepping up without immediate backlash, they feel encouraged to do the same. This cycle perpetuates itself, creating a culture where people aren't afraid to try new things or propose unconventional ideas. Over time, that can lead to breakthroughs in innovation, efficiency, and engagement. Another dimension is collective efficacy. This term refers to the shared belief within a team that they can accomplish their goals. Research indicates that seeing a colleague succeed by taking responsibility and demonstrating leadership, regardless of official rank, can strengthen collective efficacy. People start to believe, if they can do it, maybe I can too. Or if we support each other, we can achieve more. That sense of mutual confidence can make teams exceptionally resilient in the face of challenges. Whether those challenges are technical difficulties, pressures, or internal organizational shifts. From a future perspective, I foresee a continued trend where leadership become more fluid, with the rise of virtual teams and global collaborations. A hierarchical model of one boss and many subordinates won't always be practical. Instead, roles will shift based on project needs. In that scenario, individuals who are practiced in leading by example will thrive because they can seamlessly adapt from being a team player to a team leader and back again. Their leadership isn't a static title, but a dynamic influence. As technology continues to evolve, consider the potential impact of artificial autonomous systems and advanced data, and I'll lead human leaders who excel at inspiring creativity and more responsibility. Machines can handle a lot of data crunching, but they can't replicate the human connection that inspires belief and collaboration. This is where leading by example becomes irreplaceable. It's about trust, empathy, moral fortitude, qualities that algorithms can't replicate. To cap this analysis, let's bring in a succinct quote from Peter Drucker, the famed management consultant, who once said, "Leadership is lifting a person's vision to higher heights, the raising of a person's performance to a higher standard." God, these words remind us that leadership is aspirational. When you lead from any position by setting a constructive example, you're effectively lifting everyone's vision and performance. You show what's possible. That demonstration is worth more than any memo or directive could ever be. If we put all this data analysis together, one conclusion emerges: vivid leadership is by example the human need and a business imperative. It serves our intrinsic drive for meaningful work and relationship building while also impacting the bottom line through increased innovation, engagement, and flexibility. Knowing this, more confident than ever that developing our leadership skills, no matter our formal role, offers a profound benefit to ourselves and those around us. Now that we've covered the insights gleaned from stories and data, let's transition to interactive exploration. I believe that the best way to internalize new concepts is to engage with them directly. So let's climb a bit further, shifting from theoretical insights to hands-on learning experiences that will help you truly embody what it means to lead by example. In my own journey, active participation, brainstorming sessions, role plays, peer feedback proved invaluable. Knowledge is great, but it's incomplete until you put it into action. Through interactive exercises, we'll unearth how each one of us can test and practice the behaviors of effective leadership, refining them until they become second nature. We're about to start the next phase, where the mountain path that demands more than just knowledge. It calls for practice and reflection. Let's take that step now to invite you to do a simple thought exercise as we move forward. Picture yourself in a situation where you feel uncertain about your position. Maybe it's a new workplace, or perhaps a community initiative. Your natural instinct might be to hang back, observe, and wait for direction. What if instead you try a different approach? What if you identify a small need and volunteer to address it? Setting a positive example for others. Visualize the effect of that choice. Would it spark conversation? Would it encourage someone else to step in and help? Think about how that one decision could cascade throughout the group. While this exercise is purely mental right now, it taps into a fundamental psychological principle. Once you envision yourself performing an action, you increase your likelihood of actually doing it. This is why top athletes visualize their performance before stepping onto the field. They're priming themselves for success. The same logic applies to leadership. Simple acts of initiative can shift an entire team's dynamic. If you were to break into small groups, something I've done countless times in team building workshops, one of the most revealing questions you could discuss is, when was the last time you saw someone lead without an official title, and what was the impact on you? By sharing these personal stories, each participant gains a library of examples and a sense of communal inspiration. You realize you're not alone in valuing this type of leadership. Building on that, imagine each group member sharing an experience where they personally stepped up to lead. How did it feel? What fears or uncertainties were present? How did others respond? These conversations often yield powerful insights about courage and vulnerability. Many of us think leadership requires a proof persona. True leadership is often about admitting you don't have all the answers yet, still guiding the way forward. From there, you could progress to experience sharing on a larger scale. Have a few volunteers stand up in front of everyone and counter time they set a positive example in challenging circumstances. Encourage open dialogue. Ask them why they chose to act, what barriers they overcame, and how they dealt with potential backlash. This transparency mystifies leadership, revealing it as a series of choices rather than an innate trait. Now, let's move to direct practice. Perhaps you're in a real-world setting, a department meeting, a project kickoff, or even a family discussion. Challenge yourself in that moment. Instead of waiting for someone else to speak up with a solution, propose a small action item or volunteer for a responsibility that aligns with your strengths. Observe what happens next. Often, once one person is willing to raise their hand, others follow suit. The environment shifts from passive to participatory, from problem lamenting to problem solving. Through these exercises, you begin to get muscle memory for leadership. It's no longer a concept you read about. It's something you do. If you persist, you'll notice subtle but significant changes in how people perceive you and how you perceive yourself. Leading by example starts to feel less like a risk and more like a natural extension of who you are. Before you know it, you'll be able to reflect on these moments and derive key learning points. You notice patterns in how people respond to genuine initiative. You might discover that positive leadership can sometimes attract naysayers, individuals who feel threatened or skeptical. That's part of the process. Through direct practice, you learn how to handle dissent with composure, reinforcing your resolve to keep demonstrating the values you believe in. As you integrate these lessons, it's helpful to keep a concise learning summary in mind. Leading from a position by setting an example is most effective when you transform it from an idea into a habit. You envision the action, engage in group discussions about it, share experiences, practice in real scenarios, and then reflect on what you've learned. This cycle strengthens your leadership muscle. Sometimes, I recall the words of a fellow entrepreneur who once said, consistent action is like gravity. It draws people toward a common center. That's what leading by example does. Creates a gravitational pull where others feel compelled to align and contribute. You become the catalyst for a self-sustaining culture of initiative and responsibility. Through these interactive methods, ascend a critical stretch of the mountain. We move beyond theory and stories into the realm of actual doing. It's the point where your altitude increases noticeably, and you begin to see the bigger picture. How each of us, taking small but decisive steps, can reshape an entire organization or community, yet inevitably obstacles will arise that require a structured approach to problem solving. Situations become complex, conflicts emerge, and resources run thin. That's when we need a more rigorous framework to identify challenges, analyze root causes, propose solutions, and implement an action plan that upholds the principle of leadership by example. We'll now move to that stage, building on everything we've explored so far. You've discovered new perspectives, immersed yourself in stories, analyzed the data, and practiced interactive exercises. Our climb is nearing a summit where we can truly see the road ahead, including the toughest challenges, and approach them with a problem-solving mindset that aligns with leading from any position. Let's press on. Prepare to transform even the most daunting obstacles into opportunities to exemplify the leadership qualities we've been cultivating. It's time to confront the reality that leading by example is not always straightforward. You will encounter hurdles that can test your resolve miscommunications, skepticism, resource constraints, or even organizational politics. Yet each obstacle also holds within it the seed of positive transformation, provided we know how to tackle it methodically. One common challenge is the mismatch between official authority and moral authority. You might have the desire to lead by example, You don't have the managerial power to enforce changes. This often surfaces when you propose innovative ideas that require cross-functional collaboration, and nobody feels obligated to listen. Root cause can be a rigid hierarchy or a culture that undervalues contributions from those outside formal leadership roles. To address this, start by recognizing that your moral authority, built through consistent, driven actions, can be just as compelling as a formal job title, especially in environments open to fresh ideas. If the culture is closed-minded, you might need to find allies who see the value in your approach. With small-scale pilot projects or experiments where you demonstrate tangible benefits, a solution proposal here might involve a step-by-step plan, gather data, show initial results, invite more stakeholders to observe the impact. If the experiment succeeds, you've not only solved a problem, you've also showcased the power of grassroots leadership. Another challenge arises from conflicting priorities. Perhaps your team is juggling multiple projects, each led by different people with different visions. The root cause might be a lack of alignment or communication. Here, leading by example means taking ownership of the coordination process. Facilitate a meeting, create a shared timeline, and communicate openly about the constraints. Propose a transparent roadmap that includes input from each leader. Demonstrating how collaboration can work, you pave the way for others to follow suit. This action plan also includes setting success metrics that everyone agrees on, milestones or deliverables that collectively define what progress looks like. A third challenge could be organizational inertia. People are set in their ways and resistant to any form of change. The root cause might be comfort zones or fear of failure. Leading by example in the scenario, willing volunteers to risk short-term discomfort for long-term gains. Propose solutions that have a clear benefit to those involved, like automating a tedious process to free up time for more creative tasks. Demonstrate early wins, then communicate them widely. Over time, success metrics might include quantifiable time saved, increased productivity, or even softer metrics like improved team morale. In each of these examples, action plan hinges on the premise that one individual can set a precedent. You identify the challenge, dig into the reasons behind it, devise practical solutions, and then model those solutions in your own work. This process not only solves immediate problems, it also seeds a culture where taking initiative is seen as normal rather than exceptional. Let's consider a real-life scenario I observed at SpaceX. We face a complex scheduling conflict between two major teams, one responsible for propulsion and another focused on avionics. Both had tight deadlines that seemed to clash, creating friction over shared resources. The root cause was a communication gap. Neither team had full visibility into the other's constraints. The solution was to designate a single liaison, initially a volunteer from the propulsion team, who would coordinate status updates and weekly cross-team syncs. This individual had no formal authority over the avionics team. Led by example, putting in the time to understand both teams' pain points. By bridging communication and showing empathy for each side, they established a cooperative framework. Over time, conflict lessened, and launch milestones were met. The success metric, fewer missed deadlines, a noticeable drop in last-minute changes, and improved morale among team members who no longer felt blindsided by the other team's demands. The volunteers' action plan involved systematically collecting updates, creating a shared timeline, and championing a culture of transparency. In doing so, they modeled a behavior that others emulated. Checking in regularly, sharing potential issues early, and suggesting compromises. That's problem-solving leadership in action. You identify a recurring friction point, trace its causes, propose a structured approach, implement it, and measure success through real outcomes. Example is not the main thing in influencing others. It is the only thing, wrote Albert Schweitzer. Though slightly hyperbolic, this quote underscores a crucial truth. No matter how sophisticated our problem-solving frameworks may be, they succeed or fail based on whether people trust and follow those leading the charge. If you're demonstrating integrity, perseverance, a genuine commitment to solving the issue, people will rally around you. In the broader organizational sense, success metrics also include cultural indicators, such as how quickly teams adapt to unforeseen challenges, how willing they are to speak openly about problems, and whether they actively support each other's initiatives. These intangible metrics can be hard to measure, but you notice them when people start saying things like, I saw how you handled that last project and I'd love to collaborate on the next one. That's the real payoff of leading by example. You earn credibility, which opens doors for more significant changes down the line. As we near the summit of our leadership mountain, it's essential to consolidate the lessons learned. We've encountered the raw reality of setbacks, discovered how a single example can spark a cultural shift, delved into the research that supports distributed leadership, engaged in interactive exercises to practice these principles, and now explored a problem-solving framework that ties it all together. Each stage of this climb illustrates a universal truth. Leadership is less about a title and more about a mindset of ownership and continuous improvement. When you live that mindset, people take notice, and you foster an environment where others feel empowered to lead in their own right. The synergy propels teams beyond what any single leader could achieve alone. Now, let's pivot to our final stretch, where we'll look outward and forward, envisioning what the future holds for those committed to this style of leadership. We'll also invite each of you to step up to the challenges that, backed by a network of like-minded individuals who share your passions. Finally, we'll reaffirm the commitment we make to each other, just as I once made to my teams, to support ongoing growth, innovation, and the pursuit of ambitious goals. The climb has been demanding, but at this summit, the view is unparalleled. With every step, we've built a stronger case for why you can lead from any position by setting a compelling example. Let's reach that vantage point together and glimpse the future where these leadership principles thrive on an even grander scale. Looking ahead, I envision a world where hierarchical barriers continue to erode in favor of meritocratic collaboration, where brilliant minds to the occasion can rise simply because they choose to take that step. This evolution won't be smooth, no grand societal change ever is. But the rewards are immense. We'll see more rapid innovation, deeper engagement from all levels of an organization, broadened sense of responsibility that extends well beyond a person's formal role. That's the future we can shape. One where leadership is pervasive, dynamic, and firmly rooted in leading by example. In a few moments, I'll challenge each of you to commit to this vision, offering the support and resources needed to make it tangible. But first, let's reflect on the journey so far, solidify the lessons we've learned. I stand here grateful for your time, energy, and openness to new perspectives. The question now is, how will you use this knowledge? We've reached a peak from which you can see many possibilities. The next phase is deciding which path to take. That, my friends, is the essence of leadership. We've arrived at a place in our journey where it's time to move forward with optimism and determination. The future I see is brimming with untapped potential, ideas waiting to be realized, solutions awaiting discovery, and people eager to make a meaningful impact. As new technologies emerge and global challenges intensify, the need for widespread leadership has never been greater. This isn't just about business metrics, it's about shaping a world where innovation thrives, communities prosper, and ethical responsibility guides our choices. If we continue to cultivate leaders at every level, leaders by example who champion integrity, collaboration, and relentless curiosity, organizations will become more adaptive, humane, and impactful. The acceleration of progress in fields like clean energy, artificial intelligence, and space exploration will hinge on diverse teams working in unison. No single person can orchestrate these breakthroughs. Instead, they will rise from the collective effort of many who see a gap and choose to fill it, who observe a need and step up to address it, and who harness their individual leadership to benefit the larger mission. So I ask you to envision a landscape where your contributions, no matter how small or modest seem, can spark a chain of events that changes the course of a project, a company, or even an entire industry. This is not a pipe dream. It's an achievable reality when enough individuals commit to the principle of leadership as an act, not a title. Imagine a horizon lined with the exciting possibilities that such a paradigm shift will create at research labs, discovering groundbreaking solutions, teams that adapt at lightning speed, and communities that thrive on mutual support. Yet every significant change comes with challenges. Resistance to new ideas, fear of failure, and organizational inertia will remain obstacles, which is precisely why I'm calling on each of you to take up the mantle of leadership in your sphere of influence. Whether that sphere is a small startup team, a department in a large corporation, a local nonprofit, even your neighborhood, you hold the power to elevate the collective effort. In the coming months, I challenge you to put these concepts into practice. Try out the interactive exercises we discussed, start a conversation about leader next team meeting, initiate a small pilot project to test an innovative idea, or simply model consistent and value-driven actions in your daily tasks. Notice how people respond, adapt your approach, and refine what works best. The objective is to create a ripple effect that extends beyond your immediate circle. Proving that leadership by example is both scalable and transformative. If you find yourself facing resistance or doubts, remember that those moments are precisely when real leadership is tested. It's easy to show resolve when everyone agrees with you or when resources are plentiful. True character emerges when conditions become unfavorable. Reflect on the stories we've shared, the data we've reviewed, and the problem-solving frameworks we've explored. You've climbed this leadership mountain with me today, and you're prepared for the storms that might come your way. To support your journey, know that you're not alone. I and others who share this vision are committed to building a network of resources, mentorship opportunities, and collaborative platforms. You need advice on handling a specific challenge, or you simply want to swap experiences with others similar path, these connections can be invaluable. Never underestimate the power of community in fueling the flame of leadership. We rise faster and stronger when we do so together. As you venture forth, let me affirm my own commitment to you. I pledge to continue championing spaces that elevate the role of leadership by example. I will invest time, resources, and energy into initiatives that promote distributed leadership. Especially in startups and tech-driven ventures, these endeavors represent not only the future of innovation, but also a testing ground for new models of collaboration and shared responsibility. If you ever find yourself needing guidance or inspiration, consider this speech a reminder that someone out there believes in the power of your example, regardless of your formal title. One of the greatest joys of my career has been witnessing how individuals in seemingly modest roles can ignite massive changes when they act with conviction. I've seen interns' ideas that saved the entire product lines. Junior developers fix critical bottlenecks in complex systems, and community volunteers rally support for projects that uplift entire neighborhoods. In each case, the spark was someone choosing to set a higher standard for themselves, thus inspiring others to follow suit. This is the essence of leading from any position. Your actions matter far more than you might realize. As we prepare to wrap up, I urge you to carry these insights forward. Keep them alive in your day-to-day decisions, in your conversations with peers, and in the quiet moments when you want to motor if your efforts matter. They do? Profoundly, the ripple effects of your leadership will stretch beyond the walls of any single organization or community, contributing to a more collaborative and innovative world. The final note I want to leave you with is one of hope and resolve. Leadership can be a lonely road, especially when you're pushing against the grain of old habits. But remember, every time you demonstrate through your action what's possible, you grow your circle of influence. You show someone else that they, too, can become a leader by example. Over time, these individual sparks become a blazing collective flame that lights the path toward progress. I close with heartfelt gratitude for the journey we've shared. From grappling with my own failures to exploring stories, data, exercises, and structured problem solving, we've ascended a challenging mountain together. Now, from this vantage point, the path forward is yours to define. Carry the torch of leadership wherever you go. Never doubt the value of your contributions. The world needs your passion, ingenuity, and unwavering commitment to doing what's right, especially when no one else is watching. Thank you for being part of this exploration. Let's step into our shared future with courage and confidence, and let us never forget, whether you stand at the front or somewhere in the middle, you can always choose to lead by setting an extraordinary example. Safe travels on the journey ahead, and may your leadership light the way for many others to follow. Go forth and make it happen.